Long ball number 3 here on Monday morning. We look to Riyadh. Why, you ask? It is the Italian Supercup final this afternoon at 2. It's AC Milan versus Internazionale. What do you think about this one? Are you revved up for some afternoon Italian soccer in the Middle East?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm revved up. I mean, obviously, there's a potential here for Pulisic and Musa to get on the field and help Milan win a trophy. And in this era of Milan, that would be something. And especially for their brand new manager, Sergio Conceição, who has chosen it seems to be in that match versus Juventus. He made the choice that he wanted to go for this, right? That this was important for some reason. And maybe it is to set a tone at Milan, right? Under new management, we play for trophies. We go after it. We're not worried about rotation or what's coming or Champions League or fixtures later. We'll cross that bridge when we get to them. We'll cross those bridges when we get to them. Right now, what we've got in front of us is an opportunity to win a trophy, and you should never take that for granted. That's the feeling I get from what we've got here. And, other than that, though, I mean, there's still the Riyadh factor, right? Rob, how can I get worked up and excited and hyped for a game that's happening way too far away from where it's supposed to be happening with fans who are not, I know there's this argument that this is a global game. And I've had this argument on the radio. Like I've talked to people on the radio when the idea of Spain playing the Spanish League, La Liga, playing a meaningful game in the United States or more, right? And this has been out there. This has been mooted because I think there's an effort, right? Relevant Sports, that's who I was trying to think of. Relevant Sports went to court to bring a meaningful La Liga match to the United States. They went to a judge and they said, this is a restraint of trade. This violates antitrust law. U.S. Soccer cannot prevent us from convincing La Liga to bring a game to the United States. And the court said, you're right. By the way, this is a major thing about why soccer in this country is a little bit more complicated to turn into one big family that we all move in the same direction, right? Because there's always going to be somebody saying you're restraining my trade, right? Those laws are there for a good reason, but they kind of have a consequence, or they have an impact on soccer that I think a lot of times we miss. But that idea of playing games outside, I've had people call me up and say, I'm so excited. I was so excited to see my team come on tour in the summer because I'll never get to see them otherwise. And I think they should bring real games around the world to the fan base who lives in America or whatever. And I don't want to just be a traditionalist just to be a traditionalist, Rob. I don't want to just throw up my hands and say, well, that's wrong, and not actually think through the reasons that I think it's wrong. But I think once we start doing this, and the Super Cup is not a great example of the slippery slope because it's a secondary, tertiary competition in Italy, right? Like are they, before the season begins, are Milan fans and Inter fans, are they chomping at the bit to win the Supercoppa?
It's like one of those competitions like the Charity Shield or even the League Cup that's coming back midweek. You only care about if you're in it. Like, hey, I would love to win something rather than not win it. But anyone that's like outside of the Italian Super Cup, are they like pining like, man, I wish we were in that?
No, they're not. Right. And again, we've already seen this with La Liga. La Liga did the same exact thing, right? They took their Super Cup, I believe, to Saudi Arabia. Somebody check me on that. I'm pretty sure Saudi Arabia just scooped up all these tertiary competitions that are smaller, right? This is not the League Cup. This is not the FA Cup. This is not the everybody's playing in it. Italian Cup, DFB Pokal. It's not that. This is, in the case of the Super Cup of Spain, it used to be a two-team thing, right? Two teams, the league winner and the cup winner, I think that's right, right? Which is the same thing as the Charity Shield, only they just do it in a different way. They played each other in a Super Cup. Okay. And then they said, Saudi Arabia said, here's a ton of cash. Here's a freighter full of cash. We want you to play that game in our country, but can you also maybe expand it, make it 4 teams, and then we can have a couple more games, and it can be a little bit of a bigger deal, and we can put our spin on it, and everybody will be like, oh, look at this, look at Saudi Arabia, they've got a competition, and it's with some of the biggest clubs because Barcelona, Real Madrid, Atleti, those teams are going to be in the Spanish version, and AC Milan, and Inter, and Juventus, and Atalanta are going to be in the Italian version. But I understand it's not that big of a competition. It still bothers me. It still bothers me because this game could be at the San Siro, and there would be a full house of people because of the implications of a Milan derby. There would be a full house of people making this feel like a big deal, and instead we're going to get a half-hearted, not very interested, who knows how big crowd in this Supercoppa final. It bothers me.
Yeah, Mike in the comments saying it's weird that both teams are from Milan and they have to travel to the final. That's a great point because I watched some of the semifinal on Friday, and I got to say that the crowd on hand did not provide the same sort of atmosphere that the San Siro would. It was definitely a lot more laid back, and you got to feel like, how do Milan fans feel that they're at home, their team is in a final that they aren't probably able to make it to themselves, and AC Milan, they're not winning trophies, year in, year out, so how, like, this is essentially an opportunity for them to watch their team compete for some silverware. But would they actually? But with that said, would they have even been in this competition if it wasn't expanded to 4 teams?
There are a couple of things here. Like the cynical view of this, like the cynical view in the idea in terms of how the money is changing the game, right? It's always easy to point at somebody else and say, well, look at what they're doing. And if we don't do what they're doing, we fall behind, and then we suffer, and then it's worse for us, and we don't want that. So if they're taking Saudi money, we should take Saudi money, right? Even beyond the idea of just like, we want more money, or whoever it is, right? In this case, Italian football authorities, we want more money, and period, end of story. It can also be, well, look at what they're doing. Look at what La Liga is doing with their competition. Look at the money that's coming into this league or that league or these clubs. And if we want to keep up, if we want to compete, if we want to be in the Champions League or in, the Unify League and be able to win, we have to bring in more money, and this is how we do that. And you could also argue through a cynical viewpoint that this is the competition you do it with. No, if we're going to sell if we're going to sell our souls at all, well, let's sell the piece of our soul that belongs to the Supercoppa. Let's not sell our soul on other meaningful competitions. Let's not take, again, this is why the La Liga thing coming to the United States was such a big deal to me, because that feels like punishing fans in Spain for something they didn't do, which was create a world in which you need to be grabbing as much money as possible all the time. And if you're not expanding your fan base globally, you're gonna crash and burn. Right? It's an arms race that leads to destruction. It's mutually assured destruction one day. Whether that happens now or 30 years from now, I don't know, Rob, but it certainly feels like we're taking that path with stuff like this.
On our show, we have lots of bright colors and we try to be jovial and whatnot, but we do kind of end up hammering down on some cynicism here of the topic that we cover, because what's worse than decision making of, if we don't take this money that probably shouldn't be being dished out, then someone else will take this money. And that is like the worst, like that's an avalanche of bad decisions.
You have made a moral choice that is absolutely indefensible. You're not saying I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do. You're punting on that idea completely, and the only justification you have is that, well, if I don't do it, somebody else will, or if they're doing it.
I hate that. That's the worst kind of decision making.
It's terrible. It's what you tell your kids not to do, right? It's if somebody jumps off a bridge, are you going to jump off a bridge too? And the Italians are like, yep, we're jumping off that damn bridge right now into the Saudi waters. Let's go.
Yeah, there's $1 billion at the bottom of that bridge.
Johnny Infantino, he lives under that bridge. He's the troll that lives under that bridge, Johnny Infantino, with all the Saudi cash and everybody jumping off.
That should do it for now on that. But the Italian Super Cup this afternoon at 2:00.
Go Christian, go Eunice. That's all I got.
We shall see if what comes of that. I shall say, and I think he logged off, but. earlier in the long balls, Urias asked, or he stated, Sith greater than Jedi. So if Anthony Robinson is Jedi, who is Sith in that equation?
That's a good question. Can we make Trent Alexander-Arnold Sith, or is that too hit you in a bad spot?
If he leaves the boyhood club to go to Real Madrid, he might be considered just that. He was supposed to be the chosen one.
That's right. Oh, that's a good one. All right. I like it.
All right, guys, I said at the top of the show, we are just 30 or so subscribers away from the big first milestone in our YouTubing journey, I should say. That's the big first rung for us to make some growth. So hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Follow us on social media at MKickaround on the various platforms, Instagram, X, and Blue Sky. Or write us an email, morningkickaround@gmail.com. And if you're writing in an email, send us in some topics or a question that you'd love to hear about, or even a district. We want to feature as many soccer districts on the show as possible. So throw in a suggestion for that as well.
I saw one comment on our Get to Know Your District about Grand Rapids, Michigan, which I thought was very good, very interesting. Somebody was like, Grand Rapids, LOL. Now, it's the internet. You don't know what that means exactly because nobody says what they actually mean. They just kind of, whatever. Maybe that was a shot at Grand Rapids. If so, I don't know. Sir, what your problem is with Grand Rapids, Michigan? Maybe it's, hey, I want my town to be talked about more. If that's the case, tell us, and we will do it. We will make your town the focus of a Get to Know Your District. So, yeah.
I like Nate pipes in here before we move on. Figo equals Sith, of course.
Figo is because he went because he did the switch. He did the Spanish switch. All right, I guess that counts.
That's a fair shout.